In this episode, I'll be giving you some tips to keep things really scary in your horror campaigns. I love a good scary movie. I grew up watching horror films and slasher films, and it's just something that is, that adrenaline rush whenever there's a jump scare, or that anticipation because you know something's going to go wrong, and then the payoff when it does, or a particularly gory kill, really well made monsters. I love all of that kind of stuff. But I've noticed over the years that it can be really difficult to get that same feel in some of the games around the table. Now, there are some systems and rule sets out there that are a lot better at helping to sort of build that feel, and Dread is definitely the one that I would point to first and foremost. That idea of replacing all of your dice rolls and your checks with removing pieces from a Jenga game, and when the tower falls, you die. But how do we build this sense of terror in some of our more traditional dice rolling RPGs? Well, I've found a few things that have really helped me out as I've tried to play those types of games and run those types of games over the years. One of the first things that I suggest that you do with your horror games is talk to all of your players and make sure that they are buying in. This idea that, yeah, we're going to contribute to that feel of a horror movie, of allowing ourselves and our characters, really that's it, the characters, to get scared. In your traditional hack and slash D&D type games, a lot of times we're playing these heroes, we're playing these epic heroes, and nothing scares them, and they're super brave, and they run in, and a dragon is just another thing to fight, and who cares about zombies? That's a low-level monster. But I think it's important to remember, and for your players to remember for their characters, everyone has a fear. Everybody has fears, and talk about what those characters' fears are and really buy into that. And when the situation arrives, role-playing it accordingly. If your character is paralyzed by fear because of heights, then needing to escape on an outside stairwell of a tower while something's chasing you, okay, maybe they're not afraid of the monster, but that dizzying height, it should affect their character. And they should roleplay that, and I think it'd be completely fine to let the penalties or disadvantage or what have you with the dice rolls to be a part of that. People are afraid of things, and when we're scared, we act differently. As an overall tone, it's also important that everyone around the table is buying into that. Now look, I'm not saying that there aren't funny bits in horror movies. There are. There is levity, and there's lightness, and there are gags and jokes in horror movies all the time. I love the Ghoulies movie. It's a slasher, it's gross, it's scary, but there's a lot of really goofy moments in that. Or, the latest iteration of a scary clown movie that's out there. Part 2 of it, it's just got some good jokes throughout, as well as terrifying horror and gore. Those things can live together. But in your horror campaign, make sure that you as the GM and all of your players are on the same page. There's going to be more scares than there are laughs. Something that's going to help with that is I suggest horror campaigns being run as low-level campaigns in your traditional sort of Pathfinder and D&D type games. Because what that allows for is you can play your characters as regular Joes and regular Janes. They're normal folks. They aren't these epic level heroes, not yet. It's one of the reasons why I think, games like Call of Cthulhu are so great, because these are just normal people. Maybe they've got a little bit of a touch of the occult or the supernatural, but they're normal folks with normal skills and normal everyday occurrences, as opposed to being able to run 250 feet and throw 9 daggers and bamf from place to place like some of our high-end D&D characters can do. A low-level campaign, or setting it so that your characters are just everyday, normal, almost NPCs, that's something that's going to allow you all to buy into this scare factor a little bit better and not accidentally be so heroic that nothing scares you. So think of it that way. Run your horror campaigns with just normal folks. Something that I really enjoy for a horror campaign is having some sort of sanity system. Now, Savage Worlds does this very nicely. Call of Cthulhu does it well. There's a number of different settings out there that have a sanity. And you can find a way, there's a lot of really great rules online that you can find, to incorporate a homebrew rule for sanity with your D&D and your Pathfinder games, your traditional TTRPGs. I think that that's really important because that way, as a GM, you can start to tap into the fact that your characters are sort of becoming paranoid and maybe even starting to lose their mind a little. Now, I don't go so far as to slide a piece of paper across the table and say, you attack your party member because you're so scared and you accidentally stab them. There's probably a way to do that very well, and if you want to experiment and try it, go for it. But my suggestion with sanity is start to suggest to the players, either with a whisper or with a note across the table, how they're starting to feel about the things around them, or some of the thoughts that might be creeping into their minds. I did this with the Horror on the Farlight game that I ran at Gen Con. One of my characters was really having a hard time losing sanity and all of that, and I just whispered across to them, you think that the captain is purposefully leading you the wrong way. And that's all it is that I had to say. I lowered my voice so the others couldn't hear. I sort of changed the tone to make it a little bit creepy. But that's the suggestion that I planted in the player's mind. And from there, they made a lot of different choices about how they interacted with the captain. And it actually did end up leading to a little bit of PvP, which was really exciting. And then there was a fight between everybody. And once they calmed down, then they were really apologetic. And later in the game, they felt like they had to make it up to the captain. And, well, that character is no longer with us. It allowed for a really fun bit of role play according to the fact that they were scared, and so they started acting differently. Things aren't creepy when they happen the way that they're supposed to, so remember that. Stuff goes wrong, and things don't work out. If your characters find an old diary, and the kind of jerk of the party decides it's nothing that's helpful and they toss it into the fireplace, maybe there's a perception check, and you all notice the diary's not burning. That's not right, and all of a sudden things are a little bit creepy. Or one of your character notices that as you're all moving around the room with your flashlights or your torches, that there's a shadow of the candelabra, that it doesn't move as you move the light source. What is it that from the natural world should happen and doesn't? When do things go slightly wrong? Introduce those types of things throughout, and not always just when the big bad evil thing is around. It helps create a sense of tension, and it creates that feeling that this isn't going well for all of your players at the table. I think you'll find that that'll really help. And as far as your big bad evil guy, or even just your monsters go, remember that in a horror movie, less is more. Some of the best horror movies are the ones where we don't see the monster. We don't see it clearly all the time. It's always somewhat in shadow. It's obfuscated. We can't tell what it is. Use that to your advantage. One of the biggest suggestions I can give you for running a horror campaign is forget the names of all of the monsters. Don't use that. They aren't zombies. It's your neighbor, Aaron, and it seems like maybe his leg is hurt because he's shuffling towards you. As you get closer, the smell of rotting flesh and the pallid color. It looks like he's sweating, hasn't slept, his skin is gray. All of those types of descriptions can help to really up the creep factor for things. And also, if your players slip up and they're like, oh, I know what this is a zombie, remind them your character might not know what that is. Your everyday normal person might not recognize the signs of a werewolf because movies don't exist in your world or something like that. And encourage them, even out of character as players, to stay away from thinking of it in that way. Also, as we've talked about in some of our own videos, don't be afraid to change that stat block. Zombies are creepy when they pop out of nowhere, so honestly, a lot of the times I give my zombies a 10-foot teleport. I don't use it a ton, like, in combat, but if it's a mechanical way that I can let them sort of appear and disappear and jump out of a shadow for a good jump scare for my players, then yeah, there's a piece of a mechanic that I have that backs it up. That's not how it's supposed to work is a part of what makes horror movies work. And so use that in your campaign. And if you've got someone, a player, that's really rules lawyering things, saying, oh, well, it shouldn't be able to do that, it shouldn't be able to do this, maybe during a break, remind them we all bought into the idea of this is a horror game. Things are going to go a little bit differently, and you'll need to change stuff in order to make it scarier. Hopefully that might clear things up and let them allow themselves to sit back, have fun, and get scared. Running a horror campaign, mood can be everything. See if there's a way you can incorporate that around your table. Maybe the lights are dimmed a little bit more, or use some LED candles, or things like that. A little bit of creepy, uncomfortable music undertoning everything. What are all of those different little ways that it can be something other than just your really brightly lit game room or kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon with all the windows open? It doesn't really lend itself to the Creep Me atmosphere. Now, maybe that's the only time you can all meet to play. Pull the curtains, creepy music, dim the lights. I think it'll allow you and your players to buy in even more. That's just a number of the things that I like to use when I run a horror campaign. Let things go wrong. Describe some of the gross details of the monster, not the monster as a whole. Remind everyone and have them buy into the fact that you're normal people that have fears, and those fears cause you to act differently.
A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially to Sean. If you want to support our channel, you can head over to our Patreon page and check out the perks of being a patron.
So do you run horror games? What are some of the things that you do to build the suspense for your players and keep in that feel of, things could go wrong at any moment? I'd love to hear that.